Hi everybody, thanks for coming. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Angela Melee. I'm an interpretive planner and scientific illustrator and the co-founder of Studio Understory. And I live in Roslyn, Washington.
I'm Laura Frick. I'm the other half of Studio Understory. I live in Bellingham, Washington. And Studio Understory's mission is to illuminate lesser-known aspects of history and the natural world. And we do that through storytelling and works of art. And we primarily work with two groups of clients, the first one being small local organizations and communities. That's often museums or visitor centers. And our second group of clients that we typically work with are public land entities. So, Forest Service, state parks, groups like that. People who likely have trails and who likely need help with interpretation.
Let me pause. Can everybody hear us okay? I noticed that we're not using a microphone. Okay, great. So in this workshop, we're going to lead you through an interpretive planning and design exercise. And by the end of the hour, hopefully you'll have learned more about what interpretive planning is and how it might be helpful for you and your site. And you'll also have made a basic interpretive plan and a rough sketch for a trail sign that interprets a unique feature of your site. Oh. And before we get into the process of interpretation and how it works, we want to ask you all a question. What comes to mind when you think about interpretation? What's one of the first things that comes to mind? Yes?
Go for it.
This area was once a vast inland sea.
Nice.
Like every interpretive sign in most of the western United States.
Yeah, that is a common trope, you're right.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Connection to that place.
Connection to place. Yeah, that's a good one.
Well, go ahead.
Storytelling.
Storytelling, yep, that's a major one for sure.
We were thinking a little bit more basic than that. We're like, everybody's going to say signs. So today we're talking about signs, and there's a really good reason that people think about signs a lot. They're very familiar, and they're useful tools. They can blend beautifully into a landscape. I just realized I did not hit record. Okay. Signs can blend beautifully into a landscape. If they're well written or well designed, they can be really compelling. And perhaps most important, they are the most cost-effective and efficient to produce forms of interpretive media. They have a clear scope that's really easy to understand.
But interpretation can take many different forms. So there are, of course, signs, and those include waysides and geo-interpretation, or maps with a storytelling element. There's also in-person interpretations, so thinking of like rangers at a state park. There's digital content like websites and story maps, and even sculpture and public works of art can be a form of placemaking and storytelling. And what all of these different kinds of media have in common is that they are products of the interpretive planning process, which is what we're sharing with you today.
So let's think just for a minute about the field of interpretation. So Freeman Tilden is known as the father of interpretation. He did a lot of his work in the 1950s. And this quote of his, through interpretation, understanding, through understanding, appreciation, through appreciation, protection, that really hits on what we're trying to do as interpreters. We really want to protect the resource. Freeman Tilden had 6 principles of interpretation, and basically they were that interpretation should relate to what a visitor is seeing or experiencing. Interpretation should also relate to a visitor's lived experience. It should reveal something new to the visitor, and it should provoke them to some form of action or thought or feeling. Interpretation is an art and should be viewed as an art. And interpretation should be holistic. So it should give visitors the whole story on something, not just a piece of it. Additionally, interpretation should be appropriate. So it should be specific to a specific audience.
Okay, so we've talked about what interpretation is. Basically, it's public communication, public engagement that can happen through a range of media. And there are principles to be followed that Laura was just describing to make sure interpretation is done well. So now let's talk about why we interpret. What purpose does it serve? We will talk about some of the purposes of interpretation by sharing some of the projects that we've led and their goals. So these are bronze and hardwood seats with illustrations and text that are installed along the cross-Kirkland corridor. And these designs connect people with history that's no longer evident in the landscape. So the cross-Kirkland corridor was once a major segment of railroad where lots of industries were burgeoning throughout the 1900s. And without interpretation, a lot of those stories would be lost over time.
This is a wayside that I helped create for Bellevue State Park in Delaware. And the reason we created this wayside was to help visitors understand a specific feature that was in the landscape. There were a lot of questions about these purple martin houses at the park. So we created this wayside to address those questions. And we also used it to encourage visitors to come back to the park and participate in bird banding and just get involved with the park.
This is a wayside for a Spanish immersion elementary school in Bellevue. And as you can see, the sign is about plant-pollinator interactions. There were other signs about wetland functions. So this was a series that illustrates hidden and kind of complex concepts, things that are hard to understand or hard to see without illustration and interpretation, which of course, fosters appreciation and fosters good stewardship of this site. And then because these signs are bilingual, they share diverse perspectives and hopefully make all of the kids and the teachers on campus feel welcome. So ultimately our goal as interpretive planners is to help our clients achieve their goals. So whether that's preserving and sharing history or motivating people to get more involved in your site or fostering good stewardship, we really want to understand those big picture goals and work to serve them through all of the design, illustration, storytelling, all of the decisions that we make throughout the process.
So when you think about interpretive planning, it might seem kind of like a lot. It might seem overwhelming. I don't know if any of you have worked on an interpretive plan before or thought about it, but it can just feel like a bunch of focus groups or like way too many stories that could fit on a single sign. It could feel like a big fat document that sits on a shelf. But we are here to tell you today that it can be quick and scrappy, and it can even be fun. Ultimately, with interpretive planning, you just want to clarify your organization's goals, the messages you want to communicate, the audience you want to reach, and the media that you'll use to reach that audience. So today, each of you will work with a worksheet in front of you to create a basic interpretive plan. And from that plan, you'll develop a rough concept sketch like the one shown there on the right. And ideally, your concept sketch will really target a specific feature at your site and a specific audience as well.
So a little more about how we make interpretive designs. So Studio Understory, which is me and Laura, have a well-developed process for working with clients to bring interpretive projects to life. We typically work within a 3-stage iterative process, and that lets us gather critical feedback from clients and their communities throughout the process at important milestones. So we care a lot about efficiency, but we also care about collaboration. So having this kind of 3-stage process enables both of those things to happen. And a really critical stage of this is this 30% sketch that you see on the left. It is rough, but it's important for several reasons. So it represents alignment of understanding by project stakeholders. It lets people give feedback and have a conversation so that we can edit things before we've gotten too far. It also helps determine content needs, like what photos or illustrations might help tell a story, the ratio of text and imagery, how those things work together, where exactly the sign might be sited on your trail, and it can help estimate the cost of finalizing content and design, which helps organizations apply for reasonable amounts of funding. So, like Laura mentioned, for the rest of the workshop, we're going to be working on your worksheet. We're going to lead you through a very basic interpretive plan, step by step. We'll share some examples along the way. And then we're going to make a very rough sketch for one sign at your site. So one sign that tells a specific story about a feature of your site, so maybe a historic building or a special bridge. And so before we get into that, we want to just pause and give you a moment to picture your site. I invite you to close your eyes and just think to yourself about a unique feature that you'd like to connect your visitors more deeply with. All right. Everybody have something in mind? You can change your mind within the next 5 minutes.
All right, let's start with mission on your worksheet. So really, when we create interpretive plans with clients, we start with mission because it kind of sets the foundation for the interpretive plan. We really want it to be a touchstone as we work through the plan. If you know your organization's mission, write it down. If you don't have that committed to memory, go ahead and just write down what you think the gist of your mission is. Or look it up on your phone if you want. We'll give you just a couple minutes for that. All right, let's move on.
All right, so management goals. So here we're thinking about big picture goals that your organization hopes to achieve in coming years. And like we said, interpretation should really help reach those goals. So maybe it is to restore part of the environment, or bring in a new audience, or increase volunteership, or form strategic partnerships. It could be lots of different things. A lot of you have strategic plans that might inform your management goals. So again, whether you know these exactly off the top of your head or not, go ahead and just jot down a few management goals that you know or assume to be true. And we'll give you a couple minutes to do that. All right, we are curious what you guys' management goals are. Does anybody want to share something that you wrote down? Yeah.
So this may be a little unfair because you're actually helping me develop an interpretive sign I'm working on right now. Encourage more rock climbing activity, is number one. Educate on the history of rock climbing in this place. Provide wayfinding for the climbing area, and provide information for more resources.
Okay, great.
Cool. Thorough.
Yeah. And it's very clear. Yeah.
Reduce abuse of public lands, provide safe and sustainable recreation, and provide more understanding to users about working forests and how they benefit the general public.
Okay,
Nice.
great.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next section. Let's think about audience. So who visits your site and why? Interpretation should be created and ideally created with these people. So when we say created with, it can be as easy as a survey that you put out. So here's an example of a wayside that I created for Killens Pond State Park in Delaware. We had built an elevated walkway over a pond with bump outs, and we knew that one of the audiences that would be coming were anglers. So while we thought about the interpretation, we thought about implications of that audience. So we knew that anglers are a pretty sedentary group. We have a captive audience with them, so a wayside was a good media to use with them. We knew too that if they were sedentary, they could refer to this sign multiple times likely. We also know that anglers need space to cast their line and to cut their bait, so we put the sign to the side so they could still view it very easily, but that it was out of the way of their activity. Additionally, we put out a survey to visitors of the park, asking them what they were interested in learning about. And the people who were interested in fishing specifically said they wanted to know what types of fish were in the pond, they wanted to know what the pond's depth was, and they also wanted to know how the pond was used in the past. So we incorporated all of that into this interpretation. So what about you guys? You guys are trail people, so perhaps your trail would be used by families who want an educational experience in addition to a recreational experience. Or maybe your audience would be birders, so people who would want more information about the birds they would see along the trail. Would anyone like to share a potential audience that you might want to reach with your interpretation? Sure.
Target shooters.
Target shooters. Okay.
Target shooters learning about forest management.
Forest
Okay.
management,
Okay.
safe practices, things like that.
Okay. Yep.
First-time visitors to public lands, especially people who might not speak English.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Great, great. All right. Well, we will give you about 2 to 3 minutes to write down the audience or audiences that you want to reach and think about the implications of those audiences and how you will communicate with them.
Yeah, think about audiences in terms of what motivates them to visit. So not so much about demographics, but more about why they're coming to your site and what that means about how you're going to communicate with them. Okay, so moving on to story. So good stories are going to attract visitors over to your interpretive sign in the first place and then hold their attention long enough to learn a couple of things, maybe even get them to take some kind of action. Interpretation is basically strategic storytelling. So here's an example. So we tell stories all the time about things that happened during our day or things that happened in our family a long time ago. Usually good stories have a point to them, so there's something that helps people learn a lesson or that illustrates how a challenge was overcome. Stories, yeah, and that's what keeps your listener engaged, that there's a character, the character has a challenge that they're trying to overcome, there's some kind of obstacle in their way, and then usually there's some kind of resolution or hopefully a happy ending. And so, for example, this wayside, this is a project I worked on with Mid-Peninsula Open Space Preserve in California. And this wayside tells a story about an old mansion that was restored as bat habitat. So the main characters here are the bats, and their challenge is that their habitat is diminishing in this area of California. And so local bat experts and engineers work together to transform this falling apart mansion. And so now the bats have overcome their challenge, at least in this spot, and they are bringing benefits now to people and to the environment. I just want to point out that for our purposes today, your stories don't have to be super detailed or thought out. They can be simpler anecdotes or interesting statistics or any kind of interesting details that resonate with your audience and maybe answer common questions. So take a couple of minutes to write down one unique feature of your site, maybe the feature that you thought about at the beginning of this session, and then 1 or 2 stories that can be told about that feature.
And feel free to ask any questions if you have any.
All right, has everybody written down a feature of your site and what you want to say about it? All right.
All right, let's move on to theme now. So often we have a lot of small individual stories, and it wouldn't make sense to create an individual wayside or exhibit or program for each story. So to organize our stories and to make an interpretive experience that is coherent and digestible for visitors, we create themes. So themes are a broad statement that gives purpose to a grouping of stories. And themes also have a so what factor. So you want visitors to understand, like, why do I even care about this right now? How does it affect me? Themes are also a good tool to think about your interpretive media. So there may be a specific color that really helps relay the theme that you're trying to get across. Or maybe the theme is best relayed with a specific photo or illustration. So a good, well-crafted theme is one complete statement. It's clear and concise, and it has 3 parts. It has a subject, an action, and a so what factor. So here's an example I want to share with you. A healthy swamp, an example of a threatened ecosystem, provides many surprising benefits to humans. So does anybody want to guess what the subject is for this one? You just shout it out.
Yes, a swamp.
Yeah. What about the action?
Providing benefits?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Innovation.
Yeah. What is the so what?
It's a threatened ecosystem.
This one's kind of tricky. So you're right, the swamp, a healthy swamp, an example of a threatened ecosystem is the subject, provides many surprising benefits is the action. And then to humans is the so what in this one, because guess what? Humans are reading the sign. That's why they care about this.
Yeah, although you might care that it's a threatened ecosystem. And so
It's true.
if this sign was made for you, then you would care. But
You
not,
care
every-
in
not
multiple
everybody
ways.
necessarily cares. So a lot of times themes do end up wrapping up, talking about how you're benefiting people. It's often kind of
Right.
the consequence or the so what.
Theme statements are also helpful in that they set boundaries for us. They help us think about what we're not talking about. So in this theme statement, we're not talking about a river next to the swamp. And we're not talking about the wildlife that are benefited. We're just talking about what's in this theme statement. And having this theme statement really keeps teams on track and helps move the process efficiently. So we'll show you one more just to help go through the idea. Forest management activities build forest resiliency, protecting surrounding communities and wildlife. Do you guys want to guess on what the subject is?
Forest management activities?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
What about the action?
Build forest resiliency? And protecting.
Uh-huh. And what is the so what?
Use the wildlife.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Communities and wildlife are protected.
Are protected. Yep. And that's why we care. All right. So I'll let you guys go ahead and think about your own theme statements. Fill in the blanks, and if you feel so inclined, share your ideas with the person next to you.
And we'll give you about 5 minutes for this one. So, and we want to point out too that themes can take a really long time
Yeah.
to develop and nail down. Like sometimes museum teams will take a year to write a central theme for an exhibition. So
Yeah.
we know it's not easy, especially in 5 minutes.
And it's also okay as you work through your interpretation if the theme evolves a little bit. That's going to happen.
Yeah, so once you think you've gotten something fairly well down, we encourage you to turn to your neighbor, share your theme, and see if they have any thoughts. See if they think it is a good theme. Well, let's see if anybody wants to share.
Okay.
Would anybody like to share your rough theme statement? Don't be intimidated.
We know they'll be rough to begin with.
I can share.
Okay.
Okay.
I am trail.
Mhm.
And so many people, it's a rails to trails, many people have moved across the land.
Mhm.
And we want to give thanks for what we have today so that we can recreate, connect communities, and see the beauty that surrounds us.
Okay. Give
Just
thanks
this idea
for
of
what.
being thankful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like kind of the overarching. I don't know if I hit every single thing, but I think I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that sounds great.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I mean, that's the so what. To be thankful,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Cool. Anybody else?
Carolyn?
Well, I'm always having trouble with geologic features because you can't anthropomorphize, you don't want to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
So, but I'm not sure how this fits with subject action
Uh-huh.
intention, but the glaciers, the glacier view that you have today is different from what your grandparents saw and your grandchildren will see.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
So there, I guess it's the glaciers is a subject and the action is different, like they're changing.
Yeah, they're always
Yeah.
changing. Yeah.
And, what is it? Yeah, the so what is, I don't know how they're gonna be different.
Yeah, definitely. I like how you formatted that because it's different than the,
Yeah.
like the ABC that we ran through. You kind of combined the so what and the action, and that's okay. You know, you can be creative with these. Anybody else? Okay, yeah.
So giant ice age floods blasted through this area, creating the landscape you see today.
Yeah. Very clear.
Giant ice age floods is the subject. Blasted through this area is the action. And yeah, the landscape that you're seeing and enjoying and recreating in was shaped by this massive movement. Cool. All right. Okay, so visitor goals. So here, this one's more straightforward. So what do you want your audience to get out of your sign? So if people learn and feel certain things and especially do certain things according to your plan, then your interpretation is successful. And that also helps with securing funding for future interpretation because you can prove that you know what you're doing and you're making actual change at your site. So write down a few things that you'd like for visitors to think about, how you want them to feel as they engage with your sign, and any actions that you'd like them to take.
Okay, you guys have all created an interpretive plan. You're all interpretive planners now. So, good job. It's a really basic interpretive plan, but it's a great framework for you to move on to the next phase to start thinking about design of a wayside. So let's move on.
Okay, so again, our actual sketches for our signs can be very simple and rough. You can use squiggly lines for text. You can use a box with an X in it for a photo or an illustration. Maybe just write a note telling other people what the illustration is going to be of. If you have a process that you want to communicate, you can make a very rough diagram. What you want to aim for here is a 4:1 ratio of visuals to text. So everybody's seen interpretive signs that have way too much text on them. Nobody is going to read those. People feel intimidated and not interested. So it can be helpful to think of this ratio. So 4:1 visuals to text. Here's another example of a concept sketch that I made for this bat panel. So again, straight lines for text. I made notes to my client telling them in this bubble there will be illustrations of bats eating insects and different things like that. Pointed out where a QR code was going to go. And this took me about 30 minutes to think through and create, so we know that yours will be, again, a lot rougher than this. And you can use your big piece of paper that you have in front of you, but you can also sketch out small little thumbnails on the back of your interpretive plan first if you want. And I'll put this less intimidating one up here. And we'll give you, 8 minutes to do this. We know that sketching is intimidating for a lot of people, so we're going to walk around, see if we can help you out at all.
Yeah.
All right, we're almost at time, but we loved seeing what you all are coming up with. We invite you in our last 3 minutes, if you'd like to put your plans and your sketches up at the front here so people can kind of check out what everybody did. And other than that, we'll just hang out for a few minutes and see if anybody wants to chat now or after the session.
Thank you for taking a risk and making a plan and sharing your drawings with us.
Yeah.